So we're talking about permanent freedom today. And we're in the theme for the year of reporting from the new paradigm. And what we're talking about this month is freedom in the new paradigm. And what we've been talking about in the last few weeks is how we shift from looking for freedom in the outer world to recognizing that it only happens within. Only. But only 100% of the time. Because we recognize and we know that change in the outer world is inevitable. And yet many of us spend a lot of our energy trying to manipulate, control, and make that world predictable. So my question is, how's that working? How is that working for trying to get them to be a certain way, you to be a certain way? Stability in the outer realm, and what we know is that things come and go, things come together and fall apart. That is the nature of the world. And yet permanent freedom is a very different conversation, because permanent freedom is a recognition at a very deep level, the truth of who and what we are. And when we really know that essentially we are God, we are source, we are love, we get an opportunity to recognize that nothing in the world needs to change in order to be free. So what is it we're looking to be from? What are we looking to be from? The familiar patterns, the familial and familiar patterns, the downloads that we've received over our lifetime and perhaps lifetimes, the belief in limitation and lack and separation and fear. That's what many of us have been taught, and yet in the midst of that, there's a magnificent blueprint within each of us that is God itself, a perfect expression, a perfect emanation of that one power. So permanent freedom is simply recognizing that that's the truth. Now, how's that going, right? For some of us, it happens in an instant, and it also can take a lifetime of us working with that and working toward that and being with that. Science is really interesting to me, because science looks to prove something, which I appreciate, actually. I think it's wonderful. One of the things, when I was a really young person, I remember learning about the brain, and I remember them saying there are certain things that happen in the brain that cause this to happen. Disease caused this to happen. And I remember at a really early age saying, but what causes that to be in the brain? Because we're taught that that gets passed down with what? Our genes. It gets passed down from generation to generation. But guess what? Science is now in a different question. The question is, what if the brain actually changes based on our consciousness? Now, they might not call it that. So we might believe that our brain chemistry causes us to think and feel a certain way. In other words, the brain creates reality, or what we call reality, or the physical world. See, science is always looking at the physical world. And what we're beginning to understand, of course the mystics have been saying it for centuries, is that the brain actually can change based on the neural pathways we create. In other words, we've been stuck in a groove. And when we're stuck in a groove, it literally creates a groove in the brain. So, are you ready to get groovy? Or ungroovy? Because this is karma. Karma is, I have a belief about myself in the world, and I repeatedly think that repetitively, over and over and over again, and it literally creates a groove in the brain. So physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it creates what I call reality. Yes. So when I'm in my groove, whatever my groove is, that's all I can see. And that's why 10 people will have a different report on what just happened. That is why eyewitnesses, we've come to understand, are one of the least accurate, because we're all seeing it through our perception. And I don't even mean we're just interpreting it through our perspective. We are literally seeing something different. Literally. And so karma is me in my groove, finding so much evidence to show why I'm right, because that's what we do. We find someone with similar grooves, and then we get groovy together. See, the world is a brutal, and hostile place. Right, Taryn? Look how horrible it is. We dig that groove, and then we start to see it more and more and more. Now, some new thought says, let's pretend like that's not happening. Let's just go over here in the love and light. But I'm much more curious about how we interrupt the groove. Think about the Grand Canyon. At least we believe it was created with water, right? That's a really deep groove. Created by repetitive, that water was persistent over how many millions of years, I don't even know. So when we have the same belief, the same thought, the same idea, the same behavior, we create a very deep groove. So I do want to acknowledge that flying out of the Grand Canyon might take a rocket pack. Right? So we come together in spiritual community to have spiritual practices and principles that will help us not only interrupt the groove, but to interrupt it, to stop it, and to recognize that we can live beyond it altogether. Because a lot of times we want to say, let's create new grooves. I think new grooves are really important. So when we get groovy with someone with a different belief system that is more useful and more true, that we are God, we come together here and we say it over and over again, and we demonstrate it over and over again, and we reflect it back and forth to each other. The new groove is getting created. There's another possibility here, though, that I want to explore for a moment, and what that possibility is actually getting grooveless. We can step out of that and recognize that essentially there's a place that we can be and land and live from and as that changes everything. I become far less interested in my own grooves and honestly in yours. And I don't mean that to be insincere or uncaring, but I'm not so interested anymore in the story. Right? Because we love our stories. I love and loved my stories. I had a lot of them. It felt like a bag of stuff I was carrying around, and then I would meet you and I would tell you my story. There's not enough in the world. I'm never going to be enough. And then the groove would get created. So one of the ways we achieve, if you will, and it's really not achieve, it's recognize our true freedom, is by simply knowing. Because if we don't know we're creating grooves, we don't know we're creating grooves. And out in the world, turn on CNN, groove machine. The world is so terrible. New groove machine, Agape Bay Area, and other intentional, authentic communities where we get to actually come and share our process of how we move away from continuing to create the groove. There is something so powerful happening in this community right now. And I want to share a little bit about my experience of how I know that's true, or maybe it just fits in with my groove. I have witnessed multiple people having intense experiences in the last week or two in this room, in class, on Wednesdays. And what that intense experience has looked like is someone having a moment where they might recognize, oh my gosh, this whole time I've been perceiving the world this way, and I've been experiencing this world this way. And I don't need to deny what created that groove or how I got so comfortable with it, but I recognize for the first time maybe, or at a deeper level, I have the ability to pull myself out of that groove and be in a place of not knowing. I've heard that a lot this week. I've heard people say, oh my gosh, everything I ever believed I don't think is true anymore, and I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know what to feel anymore. I don't know how to be in the world anymore. I don't know holds a lot of power. A lot of power. Because one of the things that we do in order to ungroove ourselves is we begin to question all the stories that created it in the first place. all the beliefs, all the ideas, but it takes a moment where we recognize that we are the ones who are holding the power to continue that groove or to interrupt it. Doesn't mean we have to do it alone, that's for sure. That's why we come to community. Come to community where we can say, I see right now that you're experiencing this, and let me hold you in the light. And maybe when I change the story about what's happening, or what I believe is happening, or I question the story about what is happening, something profound shifts. There was a shift. Time in the silence allows us to recognize what's happening in our mind, our heart, and our beingness. And recognizing that we do have the ability to tap into and experience that place of pure awareness. That place that's beyond any story or any groove. So as I often say, the only thing that needs to happen for you to be free is to let go of every belief you've ever had.
Yeah.
And take this journey into the unknown with us. Because our original perfection is still the truth of who and what we are. And if you look at small children, the reason I always say they bless us is they remember, because we haven't taught them how to forget yet. And I'm not blaming anyone, because we were all programmed to teach someone not to be here now and not to know their own magnificence. And so what we do in communities like Agape and Agape Bay Area is that we honor those children as the messengers of light. And we create a space where they can continue to remember that. In other words, we don't have to teach them anything. Is that true, Reverend Nancy? She works with young people in a miraculous and beautiful way. They are our way showers. One other way that I know we're up to something really big is people have been giving me a lot of feedback this week about how things should be different. And I know, and I mean that sincerely. I really mean that sincerely. Because when we come up against something and stuff starts to shift, one of the things we might do is like, we need to be doing this differently because I'm uncomfortable. And I need to tell you why I'm uncomfortable because I don't want to hold it. I want you to hold it. Right? And so what is great about that is, I'm like, okay, I can help hold it. Because I know, and it doesn't mean that we don't want feedback. Of course we do. We're co-creating a community. When it shows up, it's like, here's the 4 things I would do differently, and here's why. It's possible also that things are getting touched. The power of that, the power of an intentional community, means that we come in here and sometimes it's really uncomfortable. And in the midst of that discomfort, we can recognize, as I said in the reading, that it's not about what's happening, it's about what's getting touched. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Woundology, the term woundology came from Reverend Temple Hayes. Earlier in the book, I give her credit for that. Woundology, isn't that wonderful? My science of my wounding. Let me be a woundologist. But what often happens is, you just touched something, I'm going to say you triggered me, and then I'm going to tell you how I feel about that, because what do I want to happen? Please stop doing that. I don't like this feeling. What if we were to recognize that that is a point of so much power? It's the fundamental difference between, as Reverend Michael teaches, the difference between change and transformation. Change is me changing my thinking, changing my perspective, changing the world, changing how we do Wednesday service, changing how this happens, changing the way I say things. Transformation is something altogether different. Transformation, we were in class this week on Thursday, and someone pointed out, we didn't know if it was intentional, but these 3 words, connect, transform, inspire, which came through in vision, we're here to connect with each other and ourselves, and connect in a very deep way to the truth of who and what we are. And because of that, we are transformed, not changed. And if you want to really read in great detail about the difference, I recommend that you get Spiritual Liberation from Michael Barnard Beckwith. he has a place in there where he talks about the difference. Transformation is, I am transformed from my old beliefs and ideas about who and what I am. And I'm transformed experientially to recognize and know and live from source, as source. So nothing needs to be changed when I'm transformed. Because when I'm transformed, I recognize that everything I've ever wanted the world to give me is mine to be. Everything I've ever wanted in a relationship, and I'm not talking about in a codependent way. I'm talking about everything I thought you were going to bring me in our relationship. I start to ask the question, is it possible I already have it? Right? So I'm not saying I think you should love me, therefore I should love you. That might be true too. I believe that when I get in, Prince Charming, how many people have looked for Prince Charming or Princess Charming? Or Charming? Take Charming. Please bring me the dream of Walt Disney, that he or she will gallop on the horse, I'll jump on the back, and I'll be happy forever. Now, in a workshop one time, Allison was there, we made a list of everything we wanted our partner to be. Those are fun lists, right? I want her to be this. And then Marianne Williamson says, now read that list. Would that person date you right now? That's one thing, but Marianne has a different approach. I take it to a little different place, and that is, what do I hope that person will bring me? Right? Be with that. What do I really hope this person will bring to me? We can ask that about spiritual community. What do I want Agape Bay Area to give me? Then we ask the question, is it possible it's already who I am? And become much more curious about how I recognize that's already who I am and how I make a deep connection with that. I transform my consciousness, my human consciousness, to recognize, and here's the paradox, I don't need a person to give that to me, and when I really get that, all of a sudden, we're in this beautiful exchange. So we create intentional community because we come together not to say, this is what we're going to give you when you come to Agape, but this is what we're going to celebrate that's already within you. And we're going to celebrate what's within you, and because of that, more and more magnificent people that are on that journey will walk through the door, and we don't even know where all of us came from. But we caught it. But we caught the vision. I want to be in a community that celebrates a deeper reality. We're going to report from a different paradigm. We're not going to be reporting from lack and limitation and fear and separation and racism and homophobia and all that. It's all around us if we want to see it. That's a deep groove that we've all said, oh, I'll sign up for that. I am different than Helen because of the color of our skin. I am different than Cindy because of our gender. It doesn't mean we don't recognize and honor that. It's just there's a deeper reality in the midst of that we are one because of our spiritualness. So intentional, authentic community is a place that we come to practice, to know, to celebrate, to reflect. And the practice is anything that helps point us to that deeper truth. Time in the silence. Workshops where we get to really question, what have I put in the way of me experiencing my own divinity, consciously or unconsciously? And how do we create a space where together we begin to open the prison gates that we have put there? We talked about keys on the first week. The key has always been right here. Reverend Joan talked about that last week. She told that story where there was a person in prison for years and years and years and was trying to get out. Apparently, the key was there the whole time. Right? That is the deepest truth for each of us. We hold the key. Community is that we can come together and say, you know what? I'll help you hold that key. So as we close out this month, and in closing, what I want to say is really an invitation. My invitation is to recognize the deeper reality of why we're here. We're here to recognize, celebrate, and honor the keys that we all hold to our own freedom. And that really, we're not trying to get anywhere or get anything. It's already here. Let's create a space. We are creating a space. We have created a space. Hear the difference in those three, by the way? we have created a space where that is what happens here. It's the greatest blessing in all of the world to finally come home to that knowing.